Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you are coming from. My name is Dan Whitmarsh. I'm the Senior Solutions Engineer with HR Strategies Consulting. Welcome to our December event on Talent Management Analytics, hoping that we can show you some great ways to review what you've done, look at it across time, and then help use that data to predict the future. With me, I've got some great partners joining us, Dan Grados and Andrea Sanity, who are the co-founders of the Innovative People Analytics organization. And today we are going to look at reporting versus analytics, understand those key differences. We're going to look at HR reporting and the analytics maturity models that Dan and Andreas are going to teach us about. We're going to show you how to align to your business strategy and evolve your data competency. And we're going to show you some of the key functions of the SuccessFactors platform reporting features or functions. We'll also round out with some next steps in Q&A. So for those who have been following this series regularly, you know me, Dan Whitmarsh. What I'd like to do is give you a quick introduction to Dan Grados, who's been doing this for quite some time. Both Dan and Andreas are leaders in the HR data space and have a variety of notable accomplishments you'll see here on their slides. Dan in particular has dozens of years in HR data management training and strategy. And if I change the screen here, you'll see the uniqueness of Andreas and what he brings to the equation. His specializations really focus more on business intelligence, data management, and ROI for helping organizations understand what they can achieve from an ROI perspective on organizational improvement. So these slides will be included in the deck at the end of the event. You don't need to worry about jotting down all their credentials. You'll get those in the deck. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about HR Strategies Consulting, who's hosting the WebEx. I do work directly with them, and IPA, Innovative People Analytics, our partners, are joining us for this venture. But HR Strategies Consulting, for those who don't know us, has been around for over 20 plus years. We have two key lines of business. We have a talent management, a human capital management practice that I'm highlighting here on the left side that focus on everything from total rewards, pay equity, right through to planning, data, RPO, outsourcing, managed services of your SuccessFactors instances. And on the right-hand side, we have HR information technology practice, which is largely focused around reselling, supporting, and delivering implementation methodologies for SuccessFactors applications. We do have a variety of other software platforms we do work with, but those are the key platforms that you should be aware of. And the marriage of these two is really what I think differentiates HRSC from others, in that we provide consulting and technology at the same time to bring an HR first approach to the solutions. If any of you have been joining us for the last year, we've been doing a series of events, one per month, and we focus kind of on this circle of growth here, or the employee life cycle, starting with the hiring journey, moved into onboarding, learning. We covered some growth and performance, rewarding benefits pieces, and then we layered on that kind of career development, succession planning, and then combining with that, we talked about change management and how you should use this as a tool to help usher in the use of new technologies and also to improve your continued usage of said technologies. And then we finally looked at surveying pieces. We looked at how how data systems connect with each other and serve as a unified or integrated talent management platform and discover various different models. And today, we're going to take all of this very busy slide and look at the data that comes out of it and how you can leverage this to help strategize and plan for your future business requirements. So again, capitalizing on what we're going to do today, reporting versus analytics, HR reporting and analytics maturity model, helping you align to your business strategy, talking about data competency and where you want to, where you are and how you want to move forward, and then look at some of the success factor and analytics options. So with that said, I really want to pass the screen over to my colleagues, Dan and Andreas, and ask the question, sitting right here in front of us, what are the primary differences between kind of operational reporting that most people are probably very familiar with versus analytics?
Yeah, thanks, Dan, and hello, everybody. Great first question. So the way that I think about reporting is more around organizing data for informational purposes. Generally summarized data, that usually leads to asking additional questions. For instance, I might get a report that shows my time to fill for certain positions, or a list of new hires in a month. That may lend itself to some questions that I have around, well, how come my time to fill seems to have increased since last time I remember seeing a data point around it? Or, my hires in this month are seem to be much less or much fewer than I had anticipated. The question of that leading itself to more of an analytics approach, where we try to derive answers to our question and garner insights, where maybe we lost a couple of recruiters, and so the process took longer to than it used to historically, or some other business elements that caused us to see what we're seeing in an operational report. Certainly, both reporting and analytics are required to run a business. One isn't necessarily bad and the other is good. We just need to have an efficient focus on both throughout what we do from a reporting and analytics standpoint.
Actually, it's interesting when I get my hands into clients and start working on the consulting side with them, and I see how many reports they have. It's often a mess. Is there such a thing as too many operational reports?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Certainly one that we run into quite often, and I think you'll start to hear a theme as we talk through our presentation today about making sure that we're aligning to what the business is trying to achieve over the short and long term. So the number of reports, it goes back to, is it answering the questions that we have out there? If it's simply not, because it's something that we've done for the last 20 years, it's always been done, and no one has a particular strong reason for it to continue or to keep using that particular report, then maybe it's time to consider altering that report to become more viable for the organization. So if you need a lot of reports, it's not necessarily bad. There's other situations, such as if you're taking raw data operational reports out of the system and putting it into some sort of business intelligence tools such as Power BI or Tableau, you're going to end up with a lot of operational reports just to get the data out of the system. So not necessarily bad, but certainly, it's something we want to make sure that we're thinking about being strategic with the overall business strategy.
Excellent. So I know that SuccessFactors, having used it, it makes it quite easy to actually generate operational report and get analytics. But I mean, there has to be some considerations about the ROI from putting effort and time into getting these reports. Can you speak to me about that?
Yeah, good question, Dan. So I'll start with the analytics piece. Generally, analytics is more time intensive and maybe costly in terms of add-ons or additional software to implement. But when we're talking about a dollar ROI, right, a return on investment that can be quantified in terms of the dollars, it tends to be easier from analytics, right? If I have analytics that encompasses employee engagement and starts to look at regrettable turnovers for hypos, for instance, and I see I'm able to understand some elements that may have historically contributed to some of that. If I can make organizational changes to keep that from happening, I can probably start to get to some sort of a dollar value from reducing the cost and the business impact of those turnovers. From a reporting standpoint, it's a little bit different because we're most of the time talking about tools and standard extracts that come with solutions like SuccessFactors or other tools that we may be using. The cost of which is oftentimes a human cost of people putting reports together manually, spending the time to do that, oftentimes in a non-templatized format. And then those receiving reports that may need to take time to understand those reports, where certain pieces that they're getting from analytics might be more actionable. So on the reporting side, I think the ROI is really in decreasing some of the manual efforts, both on the sender and the receiver, to templatize as much as we can. And going back to Dan's comment earlier around really ensuring that all of the reports that we're putting out there are actually needed by the business.
So what I hear you saying is there's a different type of ROI that comes from analytics versus reporting.
Yeah, I would say that there is. I think really quantifiable around, people's efforts to, to do manual work that a lot of times can be automated and made more effective, even from a reporting standpoint. And then from an analytics, right, to look at places where we have been able to accomplish business goals, and those. And the way that we work through our projects is to bring some of that in, right, where we can actually show the return on an analytics project or on solving an issue that helps fund, the next things that our clients may want to do from an analytics standpoint. So it's a win-win.
Gotcha. Okay. So when you think about that analytic process, can you help me understand or get an idea of what it might look like to embark on an analytics project or process? Dan Grados, I think you're on mute.
My apologies. We can absolutely start to talk about the process and what it's going to take. A lot of our clients start off with, what and how do we accomplish our goals in the analytics and reporting space. And so we've put together a slide here that really talks about the process. And the main theme on this process, and really with a lot of the other stuff we're going to be talking about today, is that it's a constantly evolving cycle, right? It really never ends. For reporting and analytics, obviously we've got our data feeds coming in constantly. We're taking a look at that data, we're organizing in a meaningful way, and then we're trying to gain some insights out of that. So, Andreas talked about it a little bit before where, we might be talking about losing a recruiter. What does that do to our time to fill in requisites kind of thing? So we might look at the impact of our data and actions that might have happened and produced, a set of actions that we're going to take to correct those actions. And even, it's not necessarily have to be bad actions, right? We might find out that a particular process in the recruiting process is extremely effective, but not every recruiter is using that same process. And so we might take a look at it and go, look, we want to take this and make it our standard for everyone that's currently our recruiters and those coming in. So that's that results portion, right? We're definitely going to want to take and see what are we doing, what do the results look like, and then once again, it's constantly evolving, right? So once we get those results, we're going to be starting to ask more questions.
So how do you know if you're doing it right? Is it, as you think about, is there a one size fits all, or is there a rightness to these equations?
Yeah, I think this is what makes analytics and reporting quite fun. Right is extremely subjective. If we're tying it back to our business strategy, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and we're proving the points or disproving the points that's a part of the strategy, even if it's just an HR strategy, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the entire organization. As long as we're able to tie back what we're doing to those questions being asked, then we can't go wrong. And so, when we think about the overall process, whether it's reporting and analytics, that ROI that Andrea spoke of earlier, we want to look at things like, if we've got 150 reports, like I said in the prior slide, do we need them all, right? Is it relevant to what we're asking? As long as we're asking those questions and we're constantly looking at it for more questions or to make sure that we can the areas that we can refine the process we're refining, then we can't do any wrong.
Gotcha. So I'm assuming then that not everybody comes to the table at the same level of experience or understanding of data. So there's obviously stages of analytical maturity that we need to look at. So how do you get there?
Yeah. So if we go to our next slide here.
Sorry,
I think you skipped back. Yep. Yeah. We start with asking the business essentially, what are the things that are important to you right now for the short and long term? You know, I've kind of pointed out a couple of things pretty common. You know, the diversification of products, you know, expanding into new markets, reducing costs. These are all things that are important to the business. You know, COVID and the lockdown has produced a number of unique scenarios, right, for business strategy where, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, everyone is trying to, you know, gain increase market share or increase profits, overall revenue. They might be saying, "Hey, we are, especially in that food service area, we're just trying to make sure that we're a viable organization over the next 3 years, right? We're just trying to maintain and reduce costs where we can and keep our high potential employees." So all those business strategies, and that's why we, as HR, really need that seat at the table to help guide those strategies, because out of that comes our challenges, right? The HR challenges, because we want to be involved in that discussion. We have to produce results. And what does that mean? That means we got to give the business data that's going to help them be successful, or at least guide that business strategy and refinement. So things like, you know, do we possess the right talent? You know, what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that our team has that can help fulfill things such as expanding into new markets, right? Where's our future talent gaps? I mean, that's a huge one right now, especially, and I'll reference it a couple of times as we go through the presentation today, that, you know, the great resignation. You know, we have talent gaps and future talent gaps that are getting increasingly difficult to predict. Folks that we thought were solid company men are being offered, in some instances, you know, money that simply can't be passed up. We are seeing gaps come immediately, and we're going to try to predict those future gaps. And when we go into things like, you know, expanding the markets and diversifying the product, you know, we have to have the ability to sell that product. We have to have the ability to develop and manufacture that product. So what are the gaps that we need there? Some things like with all of, you know, the gaps in the talent, where are we hiring the best talent? I think I can think back to a client that is a very big client that when we went to take a critical look at their hiring process, we found that you know, this is a massive company, that a lot of their hires and say white collar, if you will, right, were coming out of only a handful of schools. Well, it turned out that, you know, a number of years ago, the CEO or the president or something like that came from one of those schools and, you know, was in Texas. And so when they did a lot of their recruiting, they only looked at, you know, certain schools. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best talent, right? Just because it's the alma mater doesn't mean we're getting the same caliber of an employee. So taking a look at those kind of processes to make sure we get those best talent helps drive, you know, reduce costs, right? That turnover, and we'll talk about it here a little bit, that voluntary turnover, COVID, the great resignation. How do we reduce our costs is going to become increasingly important. You know, and from then, you know, once we get and understand our challenges, we're going to start looking at the actual data in there. So looking at bench strength, looking at the voluntary turnover, especially taking a look at turnover that, you know, perhaps we regret a little bit, or, you know, we could have worked harder to keep those folks. You know, and we just talked about it a little bit when we're thinking about hiring, like that quality of hire. What are the things that we're looking for that might exist already in our workforce that we consider a quality employee, and trying to mimic that in our hiring process? So all of those insights help us guide towards action, right? where are we going to stick the budget for our recruiting? Where are we going to offer maybe a different pay distribution so that we make sure that our high potential employees are not leaving the company for other places where they might be getting more money or some other perk, and really taking an opportunity to optimize the workforce that we have. There's nothing worse than high turnover and having to absorb the costs of training those new employees as they come in. So any chance we can take to reduce that, we'll take during this action phase. And then, as a consensus analysis, and just like what we talked about on the previous slide, what is the overall outcome? Did we grow our products? Did we reduce cost? Did we increase our productivity? And if we did, that's great. We're going to then start looking at, well, what a part of this whole process was the most effective, or even can we further refine and reduce our costs, increasing productivity? So those questions that we're going to be asking, that coming out of the impact, feed right back into that business strategy.
Excellent, most excellent. I noticed when you shared this deck with me, I saw that you had a analytics maturity model, and as I look at these, different levels in here, I'm wondering if you could walk me through the differences between these levels.
Yeah, you bet, Dan. So, there are certainly many analytics maturity models out there. This is one that we use with our clients that really focuses, the bottom layers really focus on the data consistency, and then the top layers build on that with insight and analytics. So at the base here, taking a look at the raw data, just having access to data. We'll talk about governance, right, which is super important when we try to do something with reporting and analytics to ensure that data is available, that it's accurate, that it follows processes. Generally, right, when we talk about this first stage, most of the reporting is done manually, out of a system as kind of a first base foundational layer, which we then build onto by templatization and getting some consistency and that efficiency out of reporting to relieve some of the manual efforts by report creators, but also make things easier on those that are on the receiving end of reports. Once we've done that, we start to look at what we call data insights, which is where we start to get into trended data and are able to answer some of the questions that we may be asking ourselves by looking at a report. In order to get to this stage or to the what we call a strategic planning stage, it's super important to do the foundational levels correctly. Not just, templatization, but when we think about the creation and governance of metrics, do we have standardized definitions for our key performance indicators and for our metrics? Is the data consistent? Do the systems and the way that the systems are configured match the processes that are in place? Only then are we truly able to get to these top level stages and be able to do them in a way where we build trust with end users and with the business. With the top there being a predictive analytics stage, which I think is super important for us to be able to predict elements around the business and make decisions proactively instead of reactively. But it is important to understand that not all of our clients may or should be at predictive today, because regardless of where you are today, it's important to do all of the stages correctly. And there's a lot of value that can be garnered from that within the strategic phase to ensure that we have the right skills available to meet certain business demands, and then ultimately get to predictive. But there are clients out there who may be very small in nature or very unique businesses to where predictive analytics for HR is something that's many years out for them, right? And so, it's important to take an approach that's customized and helps our clients really get to where they need to be by not taking shortcuts in these earlier stages, but balancing that with the need for information.
It's funny, when I first saw this model, it brought to mind the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the pinnacle is self-becoming and you're always trying to get to the top. Now, is that the case with HR data, maturity? Do we want to always be at the top of this pinnacle?
I think we certainly, I think we certainly want to strive to be at the strategic phase, right? We're calling it strategic planning, but I think that's certainly all of us should be striving to be in that stage. And then, from a predictive standpoint, let's look at applications and parts of the process that would benefit from that. But again, right, you can't do predictive with bad data. So the greatest success stories that we have is to do these stages correctly and then make it super easy for somebody who's doing strategic analytics or even predictive to be able to do things effectively without having to, spend weeks cleaning data before they can conduct an analysis.
Excellent. So as you think about this, like what kind of questions or where would you begin with an HR practitioner or a data analyst to start asking or figure out how they should ask the right questions to get their data in shape and start their journey on this maturity model?
Yeah, so questions are the most powerful thing that we have at our disposal. I think one of the biggest pitfalls, and if I'm sitting on a reporting team, there's no shortage of things that we're being asked to do on a daily basis, custom things, new metrics or charts or new reports. But it's important to take a step back, because if we don't ask the right questions, we're going to find ourselves in a pitfall where we may be duplicating metrics. We might be creating custom metrics or using metric definitions that don't align with what the organization needs. And we may very likely be duplicating efforts where you end up having a lot of overlap between different reports or different analyses. Some of that might be needed, right? If I have a downstream system that's requiring a data feed in a certain format, then that's fine, right? But if somebody's asking me for something that already exists, right, there are questions that I should be asking around what they're trying to understand, what kind of problem they're trying to solve, because more than likely, right, and I'd be curious for those of us on the call, but I don't think a shortage of metrics is really the challenge that most of us have. If you implement workforce analytics, for instance, the great thing there is the number of metrics that you get out of the system, right? But it's the application of that and asking the right question and understanding the end user audience to be able to put the right data in front of the right individual that will help them answer the question that they might have. And then from an insight standpoint, right? What are you going to do with the findings or with the data that you have? Because really from an analytics standpoint, the biggest benefit that we can bring to the organization is to have end users use the insight for some action, right? To identify an issue, to understand why it's happening, then to put an action plan in place, and then to keep tracking to see if the action plan is working, if it has some other side effects, right, where we may need to pivot a little bit, but to do this continued process that Dan was speaking to earlier. And I think it's super helpful. A lot of our clients have this slide or something like it, even printed out on their cube or as part of their office, just to remind them, to kind of take a step back and ask some of these questions.
So as you talk to me about all these, these 6, facets or analytical insights, let's call them in the header, it sounds to me like we're really talking about a philosophy on data governance. All right. How does data governance come to play with analytics?
Yeah, it's very important and oftentimes doesn't get the attention that it needs because it's very difficult, right? And it requires conversations across the organization and lines of communication and processes, across the organization. But super important because, from a data standpoint, we have to make sure that our data is accurate, that it's complete, that it's compliant. A lot of industries, even aside from industries, right? HR data requires to have certain compliancy with PII. Aligning on business processes and impact on changes to systems and underlying data. Because at the end of the day, if reporting teams are not aware of systems changing upstream or configuration changes that may be happening, or changes in the way that certain things are done, that's going to come to light in the reports and the analysis that we put out there, that may then be inaccurate or not be meeting the information that the business needs. So, we talk about data governance, we can talk about it for a whole day. But I think the takeaway here is, that it's a critical piece of, not just of analytics, but of the general business process that requires a unified approach across the organization to, have regular touch points, not just when systems are changing or configuration is changing, but to work together to identify and resolve data issues and to act on elements around that, to manage and improve and monitor the information that we have as part of an enterprise. And I think lastly, to understand that just like analytics, data governance is a process and not a project, which means that we're never done. And that's not a bad thing, right? Because we don't want to be done with analytics. If we consider analytics a one and done, we're not keeping up with the changing in the environment and the business. And it's the same with data governance. Things are never sitting still. And so I would urge you to consider these pieces as you are embarking on certain projects or making certain changes within your organization.
Excellent. So I noticed the next slide in the next section, analytical reporting team competency. It sounds to me like we want to hire people who are not just good with math and data and crunching numbers. We need to hire people who have all of those skills we talked about in the last slide. So what skills or competencies would you say are helpful to creating successful analytics?
Yeah, sure, certainly. Just like any other part of our organization, it's not a one-stop shop for anybody on the reporting team. And the way we look at it compared to what we looked at it years ago, like I mentioned to you guys before here on the panelists, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, how I got started was, hey, you like math, why don't you go and do this reporting stuff and analytics stuff for us? So that's how I got started. But of course now, especially in the HR space, maybe 20 years ago was not very data heavy. It was not very analytical. That's changed, right? And so now, because we want to be a part of the overall business strategy, we have to produce numbers. We have to produce results, both qualitative and quantitative. So the team has changed. If you want to call it a team, can be one person, can be many people. But we've put together a competency model here that really talks about some of the general business knowledge that we're looking for in our teammates. So, obviously understanding the business and really being sharp with what the organization is looking for is a key element. Being and understanding, what it takes to induce change. Probably one of the most asked questions is, hey, we've got, reports, but nobody uses them, or even specifically to SuccessFactors, right? We've all gone through implementations, and we have some folks go, in my old system, it was so much easier. I did this, I clicked this, I put it in Excel, and I have my report. Why do I need to change? So being able to have somebody on the team that can talk about why we're inducing the change, not just on a module level, but even on a reporting level, to help them understand that, hey, we're trying to help you be more successful, right? So when I think about reporting, a lot of our clients start out with the raw data extract. So if you relate it back to SuccessFactors, our clients start with table or ad hoc reports, right? And then they grow from there. Well, the sooner we can get those folks to sit there and go, well, I don't need to run the same report. My VP comes to me every day and asks for the same headcount report, and I've been using an ad hoc report. And yes, of course, I've got it, to where I just click a button and it runs, but it's raw data. I've now got to take an Excel and maybe I got to break it out by a business unit or a product, that kind of thing. Whereas if we start to think about other options such as templatizing those reports, we can kind of take the time it would have taken for you to do the Excel work and put it towards better use. So understanding why we're helping you out is vitally important. One of the other pieces, especially now with the job market really changing, in that with the stay-at-home orders and with the realization over the last 2 years that you don't necessarily have to have somebody sitting in an office to be successful. They can be working out at home. Well, what that's done is it's opened up our jobs to the entire world. So understanding, some of the those global reporting responsibilities could be vitally important from teammate to teammate. And look, we're never going to get away from mathematical skills. I just had a conversation with a client the other day that was about rounding numbers, right? We all have gone through math in grade school, and I'll admit that even when my son was home with quarantine, relearning freshman math, it did take me a few attempts, right? I had to remember back to it, but understanding that if my last number is a 5 or above, I'm going to round up. If it's below a 5, I'm going to round down. And some of those basic things and mathematical skills that we need become vitally important as we try to explain what the results are. We're trying to tell a story, and the more skills we have and the more understanding of those skills and the math involved is going to help us explain our reports or analytics. From an HR domain, I don't think you can get away with it, right? We have to understand what we're doing and why as it pertains to HR data and the domains, right? There is nothing, and I'm sure we've all run into it, there's nothing more frustrating than getting somebody in there that, yes, I know that there's 500 records here, and they haven't any clue about how those 500 records pertain to recruiting or employee headcount. Understanding that my process for recruiting should be 30 or 45 days long for a time to fill from a skill standpoint is vitally needed, so that when they can look at a developing report and they see it and it says 120 days, they kind of know inherently there's either something wrong with the math or there's a recruiter that's been sitting on a beach enjoying too many Mai Tais. So we want to make sure that they have an understanding of what they should expect out of those reports. So that's on my outer ring, right? That's really general. Even if you replace the HR domain with any of the other asset management or something like that, they can be kind of replaced. It's pretty general in nature, but as we go towards the middle, there's a couple of things that really drive home the HR side of things and results. So one of the key elements is visual storytelling. Understanding that I've got 500 rows of records is great. However, unless you're an admin doing an audit report, doing some sort of analysis and comparison of old records versus new records, it's almost meaningless. What we're looking for, especially on the analytics side, is to be able to tell a story. I'm not getting good hires. I don't have quality of hires. Why is that? What's my story? where are these people coming from? What's their 9-box ratings? All of that information becomes vitally important. The ability to understand that and tell the story visually, so we're not feeding through lines and lines of data, is going to be crucial. Understanding, and this is probably one that's missed most often, and one of the most difficult ones for our client is the cross-modular piece, right? We have our recruiting folks that love recruiting, and maybe they don't spend as much time out in the performance area or the headcount area or, succession. Well, we need to change that, right? We need to be able to talk within the team to understand how my recruiting information, how the recruiting data, and how I recruit affects all of those other areas, right? We think about budget. Where do we want to spend the budget? I mentioned to you before the client that was hiring in Texas only. Well, we want to make sure I'm hiring these folks. What was their first year? Are they high potentials? Are they low potentials? Did they even last a year? All that information is going to be tied into the recruiting piece, even though it might be something that is housed in performance. And that kind of leads me to the last one here, the data model flow and design, right? So we want to make sure that our team, and it doesn't have to be just one person, as I mentioned before, understands how that data flows through the system, both from a reporting standpoint to understand those folks that have worked with advanced reporting for Employee Central data will understand this. Seemingly duplicated rows, right? Understanding what that really means in the report, and that it's not duplicated, might be in the report output, but there's underlying differences in the data. Understanding that becomes important when we start speaking to our stakeholders. And all of what we just talked about is the analytics team. And you can see I've got our graphic here with multiple people in there. I think most often it is multiple people for the analytics and reporting team, but doesn't necessarily have to be the case. If we've got someone that encompasses all these skills, you should pay them and pay them well. But even then, above and beyond that, having differences in opinions and having new insights with others coming in is important too. And so when I think about the analytics team, I usually advise my clients to have a little bit of turnover in that team. Not turnover in the fact that, hey, we're done with you, you're out the door, but get some folks in there that are looking at recruiting a different way. Get the folks that are seeing boots on the ground on the performance side and go, yes, we might be able to pick up some improvements here with our processes, and keep that fresh. One of the things that hurts my heart is when I hear about, like a workforce analytics implementation, and it happens a lot, that is stale. It's on the shelf. Nobody uses it. Well, why is that? Well, the folks that ran it 5 years ago are no longer here. No one else can figure it out. The knowledge wasn't transferred. It doesn't answer the right questions, tying it back to all the way to our business strategy. All those things haven't been done. So it's a big picture. There's a lot that can be done with the competency model, and this is just a taste.
Yeah, you think about all these competencies down the left side and the way you've assembled them in these two circles, and I'm thinking that would be a tough hire to put somebody on the analytics team who has all of that. Does that skill set have to reside in the analytics team?
Yeah, no. I've even had clients say, look, we can't give a full FTE to this team, right? We just don't have that many resources out there. I've seen teams just say, hey, you've got a 6-month stint with the analytics team. It's a side gig, if you will, internally. It's that team is looking at the reports and analytics, on a biweekly basis, offering opinions, taking a look at what's happening all around in terms of the climate and adjusting. So it doesn't have to be a sole analytics team. It could be just somebody who kind of walks in and helps out every once in a while on a structured basis. Would be extremely helpful.
Awesome, very good. So I noticed the next few slides are about an overview of the success factors in reporting analytics, and you put a kind of matrix in here of these slides. Can you help me understand here what we're looking at?
Yeah, certainly. So, we're all familiar with this kind of matrix analysis here. What I'd like to put in here is And it kind of ties to our analytics maturity model, right? That we spoke about earlier is, the sophistication and the development time. Those of you who have used ad hoc table reports, tiles, and dashboards, you'll notice they're fairly easy to develop, right? Most of the time you can walk in the system with almost no training and do, a good chunk of this work. There are some nuances to each of those reporting tools, but for the most part, fairly easy to develop. It doesn't take long at all. But moving up, the Canvas reports, and I'm not sure if there's a lot of folks on here that have used Canvas reports. We have those two different query tools, detailed reporting, advanced reporting, a little bit more sophisticated, right? There's a lot more you can do with it. There's a lot of, calculated columns and graphs and a few ways to look at the data that is not necessarily found in the ad hoc reports and tiles and dashboards. So development time, a little bit more in development time, but really in terms of the sophistication, outside of a couple of things that are a little different, still fairly easy to develop. The story reports, right? We'll talk about that in our demo here in a little bit. And you can see just in the demo alone, when you compare it to your tiles and dashboards and ad hoc and Canvas reports, you'll notice the sophistication right away, right? SuccessFactors has helped us out quite a bit. They've made it fairly easy to develop a query, as well as providing us with some templates that we can automatically plug into the system, go in there, tweak the query, and we've got a pretty healthy report. So sophistication a little bit up there, development time, fairly easy, especially when compared to workforce analytics, right? Long implementation, fairly sophisticated in its development on the back end with the new data cube. But as you'll see when we walk through the demo, extremely helpful and has a lot of pluses as well.
Right. We've had one comment already from tiles are very basic and cannot be flexible in data manipulation. So I like the way you've laid this out to, increase complexity as we go over time. You did include some nice little one-page summaries of the tiles, dashboards, the tables, the canvases, and the stories. I don't think we want to drill into that visually here on a PowerPoint, but just make the users or the participants in the WebEx aware that these will be included in the slide deck. So I think the purpose then right now is to actually jump into the instance and take a look at some reports. Is that the case?
Yep, that sounds good. Just give me half a moment and I'll share my screen.
Okay.
So folks, as you see this load up, Workforce Analytics been around, 14, 15, maybe even more years at this point. This is the tool used for analytics out of SuccessFactors exclusively. Now we do have SAP Analytics Cloud coming on board. It's not unique to SuccessFactors yet, but for the time being, Workforce Analytics is the tool that we use. On the left-hand side, you'll see we have a lot of different metric categories or metric packs that can be implemented. What you're looking at here is a recruitment dashboard. And the nice strong thing with the Workforce Analytics is the fact that all of these are pre-built measure pages. So we go in, we tweak the input, what we call base input measures. And from that, it derives all of these other measures. So if you think about, hey, what's my termination rate? You go to Workforce Mobility, you click on termination. Yep, and you can click on termination rate. And we've got ourselves a pre-built measure page, right? The ability to drill down, the ability to look at this on an annual basis are all possibilities with Workforce Analytics. Through the implementation process, we develop several filters broken down by organization or what's commonly known as structural dimensions. And then the employee metadata, what we call analysis options. So if you click on, say, Analyze by, Dan, on the left-hand side, you'll see we have a lot of different choices. All of these are specific to the client. Now, there are certain things such as gender, age, disability, EEO job category. These are all stuff that has been benchmarked over time with SuccessFactors. One of the nice thing about it is SuccessFactors taken a lot of their clients and said, hey, we'd like to create an average for each of the industries. And so you can take a look based on a benchmark to say, how does my organization stack up to others in termination rate? And I think that's one of those cool things, especially now. It'll be interesting to see that they're released on a yearly basis. So in about mid-February of 2022, we'll see 2021 data, and it'll be interesting to see what did the termination or the turnover rate look like for 2021, are we different than other folks in the same industry? Is everybody leaving us to go to somebody else, and people are leaving somebody else to come to us? So it'll be cool to see the 2021 data. But that's one of the big things that Workforce Analytics has, and just simply by clicking on, say, female or something like that, will give us that female view. And there's a lot that we can analyze that stuff by, as well as the time periods. We can look at it at a calendar year as well as a fiscal year. In addition to the Workforce Analytics, we've got some additional querying tools in the lower left-hand corner that we can get into in a deeper demo. I know that Stories is the exciting new product, so I do want to get there, but there are some pretty cool investigative tools there that we can use. With that, maybe we can skip over to Report Stories.
Yeah, so Andreas has Stories up, so I'm going to swing and let him take over there. And I think I see his screen already. Very good.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so Report Stories, those in the SuccessFactors role, you guys have heard about these for the last couple of years. It did take a little bit of time to get these up and running, and I think it was well worth the wait here. If you compare it to, say, tiles and dashboards, I know we saw the comment earlier about, it just doesn't, I love the look, I love the drill to detail feature of tiles and dashboards, but I feel like they just didn't take it far enough and give us the ability to create just truly meaningful dashboards like we can with Report Stories. So Report Stories was developed with a kind of presentation style mindset. And so what you'll see here is a pretty easy, and I think it's, if we look at Power BI or a Tableau, it's pretty standard in terms of the look and feel of the dashboards, right? You've got your filters that you can have up there in that top ribbon. We can cut by different business units, divisions, and cost centers on a selection basis, and you could select more than one in this case, and it will refresh that data almost immediately. We can house the table as well as the chart on the same page. We can, and through Report Stories, actually do what they call linked analysis. So sometimes some of the schemas don't match up well in terms of the data. So we maybe have performance or succession that doesn't tie directly to, say, an employee central data point. But through linked analysis and commonality in things such as legal entity and business unit, we can actually use the same filter for multiple queries. So we have one query that might be for performance, one for succession, and one for Employee Central. We can actually link those together so we don't have a dashboard that's kind of busy. And so if you think of if those folks have used tiles and dashboards with a dashboard that has maybe a employee profile tile and then a succession tile or a performance tile, you'll notice that your filters grow because it's actually separate filters for each of those instances. And so it can get quite annoying when you see business unit. Well, which one is this? Is this succession or is this performance or employee profile? So some cool features there. The querying tools as a whole is extremely powerful. Those of you who've worked with Canvas in the past would have noticed that we can do certain things with calculated columns. but it doesn't go super far. And you don't have to skip over to query if you don't want to. We're going to close this out in a little bit, but for the most part, it's got a lot more. I think one of the most common things in Canvas is the ability to calculate column based on the operator or function contains. We run into that all the time. Developing report stories does that for us. So lots of ability here, and for the most part, pretty easy to use in a training capacity, you know, to go through and develop these reports, as well as tweak the ones already created by SuccessFactors. So pretty cool tool, definitely where SuccessFactors is going to be. And I think in the future, some point in the future, even the workforce analytics will be using this kind of UI, but that at this point it remains to be seen.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. So what I did see that you included in your deck was this very handy kind of grid. We should be seeing my screen again, how SAP solutions provide answers to questions. I wonder if you could walk us through this. I thought this was most useful.
Yeah, so I think the good news is that there's no single, you know, there's not always a single right answer. I'm not going to skip through these one by one, but really I think the way that we talk through this with our clients is, you know, what is the question? So when we think about new hires in November, you know, you can do that with some of the reporting tools or with, you know, workforce analytics. I think the question there is, what are you trying to accomplish with that? And are there standard reports that meet that question's need, which there are, right? So generally, you know, if there are templatized reports in one of these solutions that will answer the question, then that will, you know, we would recommend doing it there. Certainly, if it is something, you know, time series or analytical based, we move more towards the right of the screen. And certainly as report stories gets built out further and further and gets more and more templatized reports, we continue to see additional pathways there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that is an excellent grid that will be included in the PowerPoint. I guess the way I'd like to wrap this up, first and foremost, thank you, Andreas and Dan, for your expertise and sharing your models and your insight with us. Always appreciated. And I need you to remember this very busy model of where all of this data came from. And I've kind of layered it into the business strategy slide that Dan and Andreas had given us and said that this is the source of where you're starting to understand HR challenges, gain insights, action taken, and understand the impact achieved. So don't lose sight of your actual system being the original source of data, to call out the obvious. We are always here to help. So next steps from our perspective, you will get a copy of this deck and the recording. You can always learn more about innovative people analytics and HR strategies through our websites. You can sign up for the next virtual event, which will be a review of the meta-analysis of 2022 HR trends and predictions on January 18th at 1 p.m. EST. Thanks again, Dan, Andreas. Thank you. Sorry we've gone 1 minute over, but we were so close to getting it done, and very much appreciated. I think we've rounded out all the comments and chats, so we've got that base covered too. Thanks all.
Thank you
for joining.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.